After the first coat of lacquer and before the final coat, we sand every surface with a very fine sandpaper. For large surfaces, you can use the Surf Prep sander with super fine pads, and for small detailed surfaces, you can hand sand with 600 grit sandpaper. The purpose of this step is not to remove lots of paint, but to just gently smooth the surface. The first coat of primer and dust in the air often creates a fine texture on top of the paint. It only takes a light sand to remove this and leave the surface smooth. Be very careful not to take off too much. If you sand too deep, especially if the original finish was dark, it will take more than one coat to cover and we will waste time. The front edges can be sanded gently by hand. Don't use the electric sander here as it is too easy to take off all the paint. It's also a good idea to sand curved surfaces such as this crown molding by hand or using the thick sanding pad that contours around the surface. The final step before the final coat is applied is to caulk all the cracks. The caulking is always applied after the fine sanding. Make sure the surface is clean before you apply the caulking. Place the tip of the tube in the corner and run it along the crack as you squeeze evenly. Position the gun on an angle so that it smooths out the caulking as it passes over. Run a wet finger over the line to pick up any excess caulking and smooth it out more evenly. Then use a wet rag to wipe off any caulking left on the surfaces adjacent to the crack. It's very important to not leave any ugly smears of caulk on the cabinets. Once you apply the final coat of lacquer, these smears will be sealed in, and it's very time consuming to fix. Cracks along molding like this are tricky. Just get the caulk in the crack with the gun as best as you can, and then fix it and smooth it out with a wet finger after. Make sure there are no lumps of caulk trapped in the corners. For cracks that are not in a corner, use the tip of the tube to guide you down the line. The tube is cut on an angle to make a sharp point, which keeps the tip in position. Any visible crack or corner needs to be caulked. An exception is in this case when there are undermounted cabinet lights. The panel sitting on the bottom of the inside cabinet needs to be lifted up to access their wiring, so we do not want to caulk that crack. We also don't want to caulk cracks between the cabinets and the walls, because when we tear the masking off, it will rip the caulking out with it. This gap can be caulked after the cleanup is done if necessary.